Spider-Man, Spider-Man, he does whatever a spider can. He catches thieves just like flies, and he posts on B, telling lies. Look out, here comes the Spider-Man.
I didn't really get that.
I think it was a reference to all of those Spider-Man memes that used to go around on 4chan. You know, like, how do I shot web?
Yes. Okay. Yes, I do. Okay.
There was a
Cool.
there was a 60s animated cartoon.
Yeah, I remember. And then that got that was like a early meme thing. So we are back very soon after our previous podcast because we've both now completed Spider-Man's, and I know the show is literally called Spoilers for Everything, but this is like if you've not finished the
Or
Marvel Spider-Man,
if you don't care, then...
or if you don't care, just basically we're just going to be talking about everything and we're not going to be holding back.
Yeah, I mean, the previous episode we did on this, you know, it's got a whole 20 views so far.
Damn, son.
So I think it's one of our more popular episodes, and
Good.
here we are delivering,
Cashing in.
Yeah,
We don't
selling
even
out.
care about this, but we're just doing it purely for cashing in on those big views.
And the way I feel about Spider-Man right now is that I think we could just become a Spider-Man podcast.
Yes.
And every week just
I reckon
discuss
we
a
could find,
different angle of Spider-Man culture.
Easily. Well, even just like we were setting the podcast equipment up, or you were, and I was playing Spider-Man, and instantly we kept talking about it, and like we even did this like during the week as well, because obviously we were like trying to find a date to do this, and every time we talk about it, we're like, no, we don't need, we need to save this for the podcast.
Save it, it's going to be gold.
Yeah, but we have so much to say on it, so that's why we've had to come back for it. Because what was interesting is I think we both felt like we'd done quite a lot. Like I felt like we were probably like halfway through the game.
Yeah, I mean, I knew this game was going to have a lot of content and take a lot of time to complete, but it's always difficult to assess how long the actual story is going to be.
And also, like, that percentage completed stuff you get is never that good of a measure, because it's like obviously contains a bunch of, there's all the side stuff too and whatever.
I would say that, like, we're mainly going to be focusing on the story and narrative aspects, and I would say that where I was at when we recorded the last episode was that I hadn't really figured out that the sort of structure of the game was going to be like sneak mission with someone else and then like a Spider-Man boss fight encounter sort of thing. And after a while, like, the MJ stuff was happening and the Miles stuff was happening more frequently, and it was kind of like I figured out when the story was going to advance from like they start giving you clues of like, come and see Miles at Feast. And it's like, okay, so you know that's going to be
it's going to be a Miles mission. And the same with MJ was always a bit more surprising, because sometimes you'd like try and ring MJ and she'd be in the middle of something, or it'd be like you'd meet her in a mission and it'd be a flashback or
some of that stuff was quite cool, because it did give a good reason as to like why Spider-Man doesn't just instantly appear and start punching the bad guys, like why the resolution has to come from the characters themselves.
Also, they're not the best bit. I think we spoke about this last time, that they're not the best bits, but at the same time, I didn't think they're too bad. And I liked some of the later ones were good. So I enjoyed being MJ in the hostage situation. I thought it was kind of cool, because that was like it was really weird seeing like you've been playing as Spider-Man, and then because like most of those missions you're just separate from Peter, right? Like you're not with Peter. You've either done something before or whatever. This one, you are playing as it, and you're giving instruction. You're like calling the shots still, and Spider-Man's taking out people and stuff on your command.
I was kind of like, okay, this is now Metal Gear Solid, but with Spider-Man as like quiet. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I started approaching those missions, like in my head going, "This is MJ." Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was like, okay, this is just
you can get on board with it.
This is just going to be a laugh now. And my main like gripe with them in the last show was that I felt like the mechanics were very limited.
Yes.
And while that's still, I still stand by that.
Miles one was really weak. They did still add to them over time,
and that's what got better. And like I think that the Oscorp tech demonstration scene that you're referencing, is like
that's the peak of them, because like by this point you've got MJ gets the lures which you can use to like distract people, and then she gets, obviously in that scene she's working with Spider-Man, so he's relying on you to say when he can come down and take a guard out.
So you can like use a lure as MJ and then do a Spider-Man takedown. and like I was trying to pause when he came down to do the takedown to see if I could somehow get a couple shot of them, because that's the only time outside of cutscenes that their character models are together.
Yeah, true, and you get free camera.
Right. Yeah.
But you can't ever really get close like enough to them.
And interestingly, like the game design perspective, like I said that they felt too scripted and railroady.
Yeah.
And the ones that I had done at that point were the first couple of MJ sneaking missions and the Miles stuff after the bomb goes off.
Yeah.
Which are very railroady.
Yes.
But that one, like, you go through the area in a safe mode, and you can see all of the tech demonstrations. Yes. There's like a stealth display. If you stand in the middle, it disappears.
That's really cool. I like that.
It makes people disappear, and you see like a group of people like having fun with it and taking selfies and stuff. And you can go like while the demonstration is happening, before it all kicks off, you can go and stand on there, and it makes you invisible.
Yes.
And then later, when all of the stuff kicks off, you can hide from guards by standing in the same thing.
That's actually a really subtle way of introducing a mechanic. I also I lured a guy onto it, and I was like so satisfied that it just made him invisible, and then like Peter zipped him up. That whole section was good. I also one of the things you could say about those sections is that you can also use it to sort of add some vulnerability to them. Like the problem with I feel like with a lot of them was it was just kind of like you get caught, you just retry that. It's like at most you get like a choice of two paths, and you can either knock something one way or another, so it's essentially pointless. If you have any sort of basic spatial awareness, it's fine. And then like Miles's ability is that he just gets the ability to make sound a bit further away by hacking stuff. But the thing I liked was when Miles comes up against Rhino, and like suddenly you're like a vulnerable kid, like, you know, trying to, you know, get the medication for May and the Feast guys, and you're suddenly faced with, and he's I know like you can just keep replaying it and like, you know, but it actually really did give me this feeling like, I don't know if, like whenever I live near a field, and when I was a kid, if I used to go out and get like a drink from outside, like, you know, in the winter when it was cool, and then I used to look across the field, imagine something terrifying, and I'd sprint indoors. Like it was like terrifying. It gave me that feeling, this feeling like, oh crap, I've got to go now, and like you can't see behind you, and you just got to think this thing is charging at you, and that was cool. That was like my favourite Miles mission.
It was definitely even though like there were aspects of that section to me that did sort of break my immersion a little bit once you sort of realised that Rhino was basically a big dumb Metal Gear guard, and that you could sort of not really worry about him to a certain degree. It wasn't
the most in-depth one.
It was a really... I do get where you're coming from, and especially like the moments when you're in the tunnel and he's just stomping around outside, like that reminded me of things like Shadow of the Colossus. Just any game where you're dealing with like a much greater foe in physical size than yourself.
Well, and actually that your objective isn't to fight. Like you have no fight option.
And you wouldn't get that perspective playing as Peter Parker.
Yeah, why would he not fight back? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it would be really convoluted for him to be in that position and to not be yelling insults and webs at Rhino.
Exactly. And you
do still get to do that in the game.
Yeah. So, it's not like, you know, but it also gives you an understanding. I think also what I liked, it's an interesting thing. Those mechanically got better, but also it did actually make me feel like I connected with the characters a bit more, because at first Miles I wasn't like really sure about. Like I was like, oh hey, Miles, like we know, you know, he's obviously Spider-Man in the alternative, you know, in the comics at some points, in different ways, and you know, so you're kind of a bit excited there because oh, Miles is showing up and he's like not Spider-Man, and he also knows Peter. It's like, oh, this is cool, and it's no like Spideyverse thing, and so that's kind of cool. But then like other than that, you kind of not really getting a feel for him and stuff. But then anyway, I liked how this game really focused on like being a hero and like what that means, and I really liked how dark things got like across the city before, you know, any sort of resolution.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we referenced before we started recording was this idea that in the last show I was worried about crime going away, and then you know, like a day later, boy, was I proved wrong, because all hell breaks loose.
I was exactly the same. So yeah, my thing was, I was like, this, you know, I'm sad.
And I knew the prison break stuff like was in the game. I remembered that sequence from E3.
Yes. Well, what was interesting is I kind of thought that'd be near the start of the game.
Yeah,
right?
me too.
I thought it'd be like, right, they're out, and that's like the majority of the game.
Round up these villains.
Is round up the villains, right? But of course that wasn't it. That was a really quite late game, and the only thing I might say is that like it's a bit weird, like pacing wise. If you look at the structure of boss battles, right, you start off with Fisk and very soon get Shocker, and then after that, it's very sparse in the middle as far as any sort of boss.
Yeah, fights. I mean they sort of introduced the brutes so that like Wilson Fisk is basically just a common enemy now.
Yeah, exactly. The thugs basically work like him, right? You've got to web him up before you can hurt him. But yeah, so it's kind of it's weird that like it's very boss heavy at the end. Like it angles up, and if anything, like I kind of felt a bit like all his like previous foes get out of Raft, and we'll get on to like. That's the thing. It's like how you approach this. There's so many angles. Like we'll get on to talking about why that happened and what we think about that. But they get out, and it's kind of interesting because I kind of just felt like I'm so close to the end of the game, but I've suddenly got like the Sinister Six are here, right?
Yeah, like I felt it was a bit of a problem that you fight two enemies and it should be really intimidating and scary.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't.
So I was really worried. I was getting this like anxiety. I was like, I'm coming up against the end of the game. And all of a sudden, like, it was good because it kind of upped the ante. You felt like, all right, they're now loose on the city. Like, that's the thing. The turn of events, like, that go on are kind of mad. So, like, because the whole game is kind of building up to the demons, Devil Breath. All of this is happening.
Yeah.
And it's building up that Lee is the big bad guy. Now, obviously, parallel to this, you've got Otto, your boss. And if you are even remotely interested in Spider-Man, he's Doc Ock.
Yeah, it's not the spoiler to say that he turns
ends
evil.
Up being but I wasn't sure how that was going to happen. Was it going to happen in this game, or was that going to be like some sort of cliffhanger? That was one thing.
We did speculate on that. Yeah.
B, are we going to see him interact with like the main story? Is that going to be like an extra bit, like a side bit? Because a lot of the game is quite compartmentalized all the way through. And I wasn't sure how much of it was going to collide in the end. It turns out, bloody everything. Like, anything you can think of that was done, apart from the side missions, came together in the end.
Yeah, like, it felt like after the prison break escape sequence or whatever, and you get into the sort of the third act, okay, everything has kicked off and you have to resolve it part of the game, like, that's when I started to see different threads kind of coming together, and the fact that so much of... At first I was a bit like, oh, okay, it's just another guy who hates Norman Osborn.
Yes, yeah.
And then it was like, that kind of became the point.
Yeah,
like,
but that, I thought... So in terms of like the overall story structure, I actually have a lot of positive things to say about it. I thought it was really good. Like, in the fact that, you do feel like you struggle against Martin Lee. And he hates Norman. That's kind of his motivation, is he hates Norman, right? And obviously, you see the friction between Doc Ock and Norman because he like takes away the research, and they were old partners, but you still don't know really why. So you just think they both just kind of dislike him. But then you basically win over Lee. You he's going after this secret thing called Devil's Breath, and you avert that crisis, right? Lee gets
beat him up on a train.
You beat him up on a train,
and oh mate, when Spider-Man was trying to slow down the train, and he did the thing from Spider-Man 2, and he went, and he goes, that's not going to work.
He goes, that worked before.
Last time that worked fine.
Yeah, that was a great little reference. I like this, how like it's such a we also complimented last time how it's this weird mixed world. It's like it's fresh in some ways. There's parts that haven't happened yet, and there's parts that have happened that you would expect to have happened. So it's this weird real.
It has like a floaty continuity of like it's a hybrid of a collage of all of the best parts of different Spider-Man stories.
But like but interestingly, because obviously he was fighting Doc Ock in that scene, right, where he stops a train. So like that hasn't happened. So it implies he's had a fight where he's had to stop a train in the same way as like Spider-Man, but it wasn't fighting the guy.
Could have been fighting Scorpion,
exactly,
or Shocker.
But that's the thing. So like. Anyway, yeah, so you build up to defeating Lee, and it gets a little bit like, you're like, oh crap, like if Devil's Breath gets out, like they set up that perfectly, like if Devil's Breath gets out, this is bad, right? This is like seriously bad, and you avert that crisis, and Lee goes away. And then you're like, well, the game's not done yet. And I remember from the E3 trailer that was that raft happens.
But it's also that they mentioned Wilson Fisk going away to the raft.
Mm-hmm.
And even when it's mentioned there's a slight sort of, and then there's a J. Jonah Jameson podcast where they talk about, like, J. Jonah Jameson's really happy that the raft has decided to power itself through electro.
Yes.
And I was just like, that's the worst idea anyone had ever. Let's put a supervillain. Let's use his powers to control the prison that keeps him.
Yeah.
Sure, that won't backfire in any stupendous way.
And it did. Well, I don't think that was how it happened.
So it felt like there was a lot of narrative besides the trailer. Like, I felt there was a not narrative foreshadowing.
If you hadn't seen the trailer, you'd still have got this sense that, like, you know, you knew about the raft. It was mentioned a lot in the game.
Oh, this is brilliant! I'm glad we're talking about the raft because have you seen Jessica Jones at all?
No.
Okay, well, in season 2, they talk about the raft quite a lot. They talk about sending a superpowered person there who's gone a bit mental. Say, like, if you don't get your stuff together, we're sending you to the raft.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that's really cool because we have seen the raft in Civil War.
In Civil War, yeah.
We know that it exists, and it's like this. We've seen Tony Stark take a helicopter there.
Yes.
That's how far away from everything
Atlantic
it was.
Ocean. Because I always pictured the raft in the middle of the ocean. And
it's a short swim away.
It's in the Hudson. Like, but come on, it's not in the MCU. It's not in the Hudson. It's in it. It's in it for this game.
But it totally just felt like a thing of well, everyone hated those loading screens to get to Mother Base in the Phantom Pain, so let's just put it really close.
Yeah, and also it's kind of nice that it's a big presence. Like, it stands out because most of the skyline of even Oscorp buildings, like ones that are fictional in the game, are like real buildings just renamed as Oscorp. Whereas the raft is like the only thing I can think of that stands out as like other than the Avengers Tower is a different addition to the New York landscape. So it's like it's really noticeable. Like,
yeah,
you come across it like that's not a standard building. Even the Avengers Tower, if you weren't really paying attention, is just like a big skyscraper. But the raft is a pretty sizable.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely out of keeping with the rest of the aesthetic, even in terms of the games universe.
This does bring me on to another just general, like, it's not a problem. Like, fine, I get it. It's a New York based game, but like, why is everything so close to a big population centre? Like, absolutely everything. Like, you got the Avengers Tower there, which, you know, fair enough. It's Stark, it's an office building, it doesn't attract things. But then you've got, like, the mega prison, which, like, by the way, the whole point of Raft is that it's like an Alcatraz, right? It's like super hard to escape from.
That's it. It's that it's a super prison for super villains with powers.
Right? So you definitely wouldn't put it that close to the shoreline, because, like you said...
Or next door to another prison.
Exactly. So that, like, was annoying. And then... Norman Osborn was developing a biological... Well, he didn't... It wasn't meant to be a biological weapon, which I liked. There's a lot in this game that was like...
it's actually meant to be something a bit different.
Yeah.
We'll get to that later.
He mentioned that, you know, like, you don't get why... So, yeah, without going on to exactly why it is, it's meant to be a cure. You know, it's for diseases in general, but it's not right yet, so it's actually... It's highly contagious, and it's basically a plague in a bottle while they're working on it. And Lee finds out about it. Or, well, anyway.
Well, we can explain that because
but the thing is, like, this is kind of...
So Norman Osborn's doing experiments to develop this cure, and one of the things is that he starts doing human test subjects, and Martin Lee as a child is one of them.
Yes, and that ends up, like, something goes wrong during it, he kills his parents as part of the tests.
And he becomes Mr. Negative.
And that effect was... he turned him into Mr. Negative. Which is a great motivator.
And Oscorp is used in a lot of Spider-Man media. It's used to sort of justify the creation of a lot of the villains.
Yes.
Like, even in the Raimi universe, Oscorp was responsible for the Goblin suit and the grenades and stuff. All of that was military tech that they couldn't sell.
Yeah.
I think they did it again in Amazing Spider-Man. So
even Doc Ock in the Raimi universe was funded by Oscorp.
Yep, totally.
Yeah. So and it was them removing his funding that, you know, and then obviously the inhibitor got broken. But anyway, what I really liked about this was that, like, Lee is done with, you think, and then that's where all the threads start tying back in, because that's very much one thread, and you play that through to the end. Actually, you put Lee away, and then the other threads that have started happening, that's where they all start to curl back into the story. So you see Doc Ock form. You know, you get the malfunction of the chip around that time, which actually I quite like the fact that, because you've got this puzzle mechanic all the way through, and they show the malfunction that you're there as it's happening. You're trying to solve the problem, and then he, like, shuts it down, and you're like, oh, thank God. Like, I thought it was a bit irresponsible of Peter just to, like, walk out of that room. I'd have been like, "Yo, Doc, I'm taking this off you," but no, he just like walked out, and immediately the moment Pete was gone, he just like saw Norman on the TV and was like plugging that back in, like
he turned evil on the spot.
Yeah,
like, and I think like the Doc Ock stuff had been going on throughout the game. Like, you were taking trips to his research facility, and you check in there every once in a while, and he was getting progressively more like closer to the dark side.
Yeah, well, also I think what was quite what they did well about him was that it wasn't just his disdain for Norman or his quest for science. He also had a very personal personal reason for hating Norman, but also his body failing him. Like, the fact he had a degenerative disease it's like that. That's actually really like grounds him in like actually that's a really big motivator for him to get this tech done as well, because he's got this great mind, and the idea of being trapped inside a body with this great mind is like torturous, right?
Yeah, it would be like a living nightmare for the guy,
and the fact he's so close, and Norman takes away his research money. Obviously they have previous beef as well. And then when this happens, it's just, it all comes together. And I think the thing that I liked about the plot of this game is that just a lot of it just felt like it made sense. I didn't really have to question any of their motives by the end. Like, you're questioning it all the way through because not everything's revealed to you. But I feel like by the time you get the end, you understood why everyone acted the way they did. I didn't feel like anyone acted stupidly or without proper. They didn't act in a way I wouldn't expect a human to react.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Spider-Man villains is that they have always had, despite being presented as these almost like 2D bland villain of the week, they have one power or one gimmick, and that's the thing. They've always had these sort of tragic elements to their backstories. And like, so the Doc Ock terminal like degenerative diseases stuff felt appropriate because it adds a degree of tragedy to him as a character. Dr. Kirk Connors, who becomes the Lizard, has a similar thing with his arm being missing. Even like characters as two-dimensional as the Rhino, he's stuck in that suit. He can't get out.
Yeah. And this is what I really liked about. So what happens is when Doc Ock, becomes him. So the inhibitor's gone, and the AI in the arms is basically interacting with his brain in a negative way, and it's bringing out the worst in him. It's like a combination of the two. I like how that catalyzes. That is he has this brilliant mind, and he uses what he knows. So his objective is get to Norman, right? And he knows that Lee has that same objective, and he nicks Lee's plan, which is like devil's breath, and he's going to make Norman. He wants to hurt Norman, not just by like killing him or anything,
but by like destroying his reputation,
his entire empire. Right? They'll take out his empire. They'll destroy his reputation. He'll never be able to make mayor again. He'll probably be arrested. That was the whole idea. And what I liked about Doc Ock is the idea that he's not just a dangerous foe physically, but he's like, it was his mental capacity, like his ability to plan and stuff. And what I liked is he became the orchestrator of the Sinister Six, right? The Wrathbreaker happens, you're there trying to figure out what happened, and like even Lee is now
saying like that he's not in charge. He says things very clearly in that fight that let you know he's not in charge.
He literally says to them, like, remember, he wants him alive. So you're immediately like, right, Lee is now like this like subordinate to this other guy, obviously it's Doc Ock, which is revealed. But even then, the fact they're sparing, like, he spares Peter, right? Because he worked out that, like, because his beef is not with Spider-Man, right? It is like, he's basically saying, we're not going to kill you, just don't, this is your final warning, don't get in our way.
If I have one problem with the Doc Ock narrative, it's very much that the tension should always be, like, the Doc Ock, or whichever villain it is, but be it Green Goblin or whatever, the father figure turned bad. The thing should always be like, how does Spider-Man stop this person who's gone too far that he also doesn't want to kill because they're his friend or family?
Yeah.
And to me, it was like there would have been more tension had Doc Ock been trying to get Peter over to his side in some way, rather than just sort of attacking him straight up and being like, stay out of my way or I'll kill you, Spider-Man. Because even in the Raimi film, like Green Goblin, he says to Spider-Man, like, let's team up.
Yeah.
We could destroy the city. We could do whatever we want. Like, everyone else, they ain't got shit on us. Let's do it. And Spider-Man's like, no, I stand by my thing. And it felt like in this game, that moment was kind of alluded to right at the end. He said something like, "You've been a son to me. You were almost a son to me."
But that was a cheap way to try and like, because he's disabled at that point basically.
Yeah.
And he basically he's desperately grasping at straws to try and get back up and running. Right. It's just a desperate last attempt. He used it a desperate last attempt to appeal to Peter's.
Yeah, humanity. I mean, I would almost compare that from that perspective. Yeah, I would compare that moment to Iron Man saying to Captain America, like, you don't deserve the shield, because it was the only thing he had left to hurt him.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
It's just like this like last shot you can take. So, but well, I mean, I do agree with you that would be an extra layer to that they could have ran with, but I still don't think it breaks down that like father figure like being betrayed. Like
it doesn't.
You've still got this like Peter still clearly struggles with it. He feels betrayed by him. He was like a really big role model, and that was like they and what I liked about it was they put enough time in. You spent enough time in the game, and like if you're like someone like me who goes around and like when I have an option to read something that's like there, I read it. So I spent a lot of time in the lab like listening to like the tapes he left. He helped. Are
we going to end up making wheat cakes? Is this where all of this goes?
Yes. So like I really like that. They spent the time really getting you involved in that relationship, and it is sad because like obviously if you know where that's going, that he's becoming Doc Ock at some point. It's really sad because they had a really good bond, and actually he was a good person. It was the chip and his anger that corrupted him, and it's sad. And I think that's one thing that was really what they were leaning on here was and this theme of corruption actually in general, because Lee and Doc Ock are very similar. They both let their anger win, right? And that's almost what Peter had to resist doing, right? Because there's that point at the end where, so like obviously, and this is going back to this theme of like the game trying to make a point about what being a hero is, and this is actually what, and I was saying to you just before we started recording this, it's gone back to where Spider-Man is now like one of my favorite, if not my favorite superhero, especially right now, because I kind of like, I hadn't had that like heroic Spider-Man presented to me in so long, or in such a good way, and I really liked about this game where he had some really difficult choices to make at the end of that game. So Doc Ock's lying there disabled, and he's clearly hurting, and then like, he resists doing it. He still walks off with Devil, and he doesn't do anything to him. But then Doc Ock in his like desperation, he tries to say, "Oh look, help me, like back up, blah blah blah. Are you you always so good to me. You promised that you'd help me," kind of thing. And he had to fight that, and then he tried to threaten Peter by saying, "I know who you are, Pete." Like, do you know what I mean? He then was like threatening to reveal his identity, and Peter was just like, "You do whatever you feels right," and walked off. And I was like, "Boom!" That's like he like nailed it.
And in a way, like we'll get onto the other hard choice that Peter had to make.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But in a way, like there really isn't a lot that people can do to hurt Peter anyway, because. Right. So one thing I just want to say to kind of tie a bow on the Doc Ock stuff is that I do enjoy the presentation of this game with regards to that storyline. I liked that he didn't turn evil right away and that it was a gradual thing. Mm-hmm. But I don't necessarily like how once Doc Ock turned evil, instead of having you don't battle him or encounter him until like right at the end of the game.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, that was good because it felt like the fight at the end was climactic. But on the other hand, it was like the developers said, well, we still have to have some more interaction. So let's have this abstract scene where Peter gets poisoned by the scorpion and you have to run through this area talking to projections of Peter's subconscious.
So, I feel like a lot of this game... Well, you know what? This has been like the Batman Arkham Asylum effect, right?
Like, did they have to do the
Scarecrow bit?
Yeah, the
right?
Scarecrow bit as well.
But not just that. Like, I mean, Batman Arkham Asylum. I mean, it just goes to show what a great game that was, because it did. I mean, it's influenced. There's been so many games like it. Going, combat wise, there was a really heavy influence. That idea of a brawler where you can have this like third person brawling mechanic where you just put them against lots of enemies, and it's about managing your enemy types and stuff. Stealth, I mean, you can see the stealth elements in this game taken from that, although a lot less involved. Like the thing with
the perch based takedowns and sort of flying, gliding around stuff is very very similar.
Yeah, minus the whole psychology bit. I really like you freak everyone out as you go, and you don't have that at all in this. It's like once they spotted you, it's just combat. You can't.
I would have liked interrogation mode.
Yeah, right. Peter Parker doing interrogation. I'm not sure that works.
Insomniac, if you it didn't work in the MCU.
Exactly when he put his interrogation mode on.
Insomniac, if you're listening, how about some interrogation DLC?
They got the heist DLC. That's next, isn't it? With
Blackius Catius.
But yeah, no, I know what you mean. And this goes back to what we were saying at the end, is where the Martin Lee storyline that you follow through is like the majority of the game, and you complete that. So then it's actually like, okay, well, do they drag out? Do they? Because that could almost be a halfway point. Because what happens next is so much happens next, actually, to the point where it's like they must have really struggled with like, how do we pace this? Okay, because obviously and I think it works because that Martin Lee, the bit up to where you defeat Lee for the first time, is really good because it allows a lot of time for characterization. They spent a lot of time. It was very slow paced. Like you spent a lot of time, a lot of mystery solving, a lot of puzzles going on, a lot of like pieces coming together, and it set up that bit where after everything breaks loose, you know all the motivation for Doc Ock. You've learned a lot about Norman, which then gets revealed later, and that's a nice other like twist to it. You got Harry missing. That's like another part of it. Like they sow all those seeds in that part of the game, and it's really well paced, right? So then they get to the point where, okay, well now how do we give Spider-Man? So Spider-Man's, we know, is like a veteran. He's already put away several supervillains, and he's just defeated another one. Lee's just another one in this long line. It was a bit harder, but he's overdone that. And now they're like, how do we step this up, right? So it's like, and what they chuck at you in like almost all at once is
escaped convicts.
All the people he's put away,
get
out, including all the raft convicts. They flooded into New York and set up like areas.
Well, you also have the Rikers. Yeah, so you have Rikers inmates, raft prisoners, supervillains. And
Sable have gone mental as well.
Sable just got...
So martial law's been declared. So Sable are now the enemy as well. So we were complaining about like hideouts running out and like crime going away. Suddenly you've got Sable crimes and like the Fisk gang crimes.
Demons are still a thing.
So yeah, like all of this, like the city is now like apocalyptic. So this is where they must have had to make a decision where it's like you could almost make the campaign could have gone on for twice as long. But the problem is, it's like you've got all these pieces together. There's not much more you can add. Like, I would say it's kind of a shame that, like you said, you fight. So there's like four. Well, there's actually the 6 villains now. So you got Doc Ock and Lee, who are like working closely together. The Vulture gets paired with Electro, and Rhino and the Scorpion get paired together. So like they've been given jobs by Doc Ock, and what's nice is there's this scene where you go and you find out all the motivation behind it. So Doc Ock is, like Rhino has his motivation. He wants to get out of the suit, and Doc Ock's promised if he helps him, he'll free him of the suit. Scorpion, except blah blah blah. So everyone's got their like promises from Doc Ock that these depths that he's gonna.
Yeah, like it was really cool, like listening to how he was either gonna improve their lives or fix them, or improve their capacity to fuck shit up even more.
So Electro just wanted to become pure energy.
Because at the same time, like it didn't present Doc Ock as being this super benevolent guy who was like if those people had received those treatments from Doc Ock, like not all of them would have benefited mankind. A lot of them would have empowered bad people to do worse things. So to me, it showed that like Doc Ock was almost it showed how far he had gone in terms of like his whole thing, and it's even in the movie like that you have to use your talents and your gifts to benefit mankind, and that aspect of his personality was now gone.
But even his and he just completely let anger win, but just not to the point where he wasn't like destroy the world, but he was like almost worse. He was just indifferent to other people. Like
this is what it takes for me to get revenge on Norman.
Here's
Osborn,
my end goal, and I don't care what gets in the way. Like so, like he'll help the Rhino, right? He'll like de-suit him, which is all he wants, right? And you can say, oh, that's like a good thing, right?
Yeah. No more Rhino.
But he's not doing it because there's no more Rhino. He's doing it because that's how he gets Rhino to do what he wants. And
I want nice guy Doc Ock memes.
Yeah.
He's just trying to help everyone.
I like that. That could be a thing. Get on r/gaming. But yeah, and so anyway, this last bit of the game, at least all I would say is at least you had a moment with. So I'm not sure I would have wanted that bit to be dragged out, and also no one likes a game where you're stuck I have a bit of a funny thing where like games, you have a nice world that you're in. Like up until then, in between missions, if you wanted just to live and go around the city, you could, and you could have a great time. Okay. At this point in the game, they were like, well, we want to really up the ante. So all these people are on the loose, and also New York is in real peril. And the way they've done it is like, there are Sable agents and thugs who will attack you on sight. So when you're swinging through the city...
And each other.
And each other, which is really cool, actually. Made for a lot of dynamic moments. So even when you're swinging around, you're being shot at, missiles are coming at you. That's not a relaxing thing. You can't just stop in between missions anymore and just, like, joy photo.
It almost becomes sarcastic.
Yes.
Every time that crime buzzer thing was going off, I was just like, wow, I am being proved so wrong from the last show.
Yeah, they heard you and they were like, right, well, check this out.
You want crime? Have all the crime in the world.
So I think for that reason, it had to be a quick climax, because it's like, they've upped the stakes so much, you can't drag that out without it almost being depressing and unenjoyable to play.
But there were things in the story that felt like it felt like content had been cut, or storylines sort of resolved themselves. Well, one in particular, I'm talking about Silver Sable.
Yeah, she just went.
This is the thing, right? So Silver Sable appears with Spider-Man in 2 cutscenes. In the first one, she just starts beating the crap out of him, and Yuri has to stop her.
Yeah, I thought she was a weak element of the game.
And then in the next scene, she like kicks Spider-Man, and he like falls to the floor. She's like, okay, well she's gonna be a formidable opponent, even though she is just a human being.
Yeah.
And then they have a brief team up at the end of the game, but even after teaming up, 5 seconds after teaming up, they split up.
Yeah.
It's like, let's me and you, even though we're worst enemies, form an alliance. Yeah. Great. First action, let's split the party. And she goes, and then the next thing you get from her after the Doc Ock...
I guess you were right.
She's you've changed my entire world perspective, and I'm going to be a good guy now.
Yeah.
It was nice knowing you, Spider-Man. Yeah. It's like... It would have been really cool to have... I'm equal opportunity. I would quite like some female representation in the villains in this game, in the boss fights in this game. Where's my SJW articles on that?
I mean, when you say change her mind, like, you could have had him save her, for example.
Fight her to the death, and he spares her life or saves her life.
Yeah, and because she's so an enemy of Spider-Man, but also an enemy of she's getting in the way of Lee and stuff. So imagine a fight where you're fighting her, got some great mechanics going on. She's got the dual guns, that's kind of cool. Imagine where you fight her, but then someone interrupts and she just wrecks her, right? And then you save her from them and you forgive her, just the fact you were fighting a minute ago, and then she agrees to up and leave, and you can have the exact same conversation on the phone, exact same motivation for exiting the Sable environment, which
is why it feels like there was cut content.
No, you're right. I've forgotten about that. That was a shame.
If it were me, I would have gone the old-fashioned way of, okay, well, female bad guy, female protagonist, let's just have a good old cat fight and MJ can knock the bitch out with a taser.
Yeah.
That's how I would have written it.
Just go up behind and press square and that's it, done.
Yeah, that would have been... even that was more than they had in the game.
No, you're right. Yeah, she just went outside and dealt with those while he went and fought Lee. But what I was going to say was... so I'm not sure how I feel about it, but at least I feel like you had an interaction with every villain before your boss fight with them. So even though they paired them up, at least you had so yes, the Scorpion one was a bit weird and they used it as an excuse to give some extra context,
It was cool, although I will say that I didn't like that section overall.
I didn't really care for it.
It was cool for about 5 minutes to see the floor is lava again.
Yes, the gas, I thought
okay, this is a nice throwback. Yeah. And it just kept going on and on, and then then you're getting into all of the score.
And also, it was just super weak. It was most of the game did a good job of having some justification, or where it mentioned science, it kind of felt like it could be real. Whereas this was it's in my mind, but he is actually swinging across the city. He's got to achieve something in his dream. I was just this is just silly now. This is really dumb.
Yeah, and you go.
He says about the game with the Spider-Man and the and the Doc Ocks. But I felt at least they gave them a little bit of time in the sun before you beat them, and those boss fights, they were interesting. You had to do a bit. It did feel like there was some payoff for having learnt the mechanics of the game.
Yeah, definitely with the Rhino and knowing how you could
drop the stuff on him.
Yeah, dodge out of the way.
I really enjoyed the Electro. Anything that was aerial in that game, I really enjoyed. So the fact that they gave you a boss fight with Electro and Vulture, where you basically stay in the air the whole time, and it's about like you get to swing Vulture's blades back at him and like web up Electro and like.
I was taking Vulture's missiles because he fires a whole bunch of them at you. Yeah. And I was taking them and just throwing them at Electro.
Yeah. I really and I do actually feel like it gave you this sense of like, well, he's beaten him before, so having them 1-on-1, it did make sense that they wouldn't just give you him 1-on-1 because he's done that, right?
Yeah, true, but it could have.
It could have been cool. Could have enhanced them.
Yeah,
in some way and
like that
the fight.
That could have been it, but it also felt like at the same time, the facing two villains only has the challenge of one boss fight is a way for them to kind of again cover two villains in one scene, right?
It was that they covered two villains in one scene, but I feel like that did work for pacing. I think I'd have felt really frustrating if like I had to go and defeat all the 4 bosses. Like, because I guess that's also because things were really ramping up, and I really wanted to see where it was going. I for one didn't mind that. Like,
but the problem with it being, and I guess they do kind of. They only did it for 2 of them. There were only 2 pairs because Martin Lee and
Doc Ock had
you
their
fight
separately.
So fair enough. But on the one hand, like once you realise that there's going to be like double team up boss fights or whatever, the dramatic the dramatic stakes felt lower because it wasn't something as scary anymore because you'd already faced 2 villains in the previous Rhino encounter.
But I also think there's something like to be said about like it makes you feel empowered. Like, I did it the other way around, by the way. I did Electro and Vulture first.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So, but anyway, yeah. But yeah, no, I think there's something to be said for like, also like wanting to feel.
Maybe
badass.
I did as well. Then I can't remember.
Like wanting to. I know. I think you have a choice. I think you either go check out one thing and then check out another.
Oh, okay, yeah, because it's Electro or Rhino that you can go to.
Exactly.
Yeah, fair enough.
But
that's one half of each pair. Yeah.
God. Yeah. So I feel like. No, I felt like it's quite like it gave you that. I just enjoyed those boss fights. I felt like really empowered by it. Like I felt like I'm a badass. I'm doing like 2 of these villains at once. I know they'd like obviously tone it down. It was also a way of wrapping up, getting through stuff quicker. But at least I feel like they spent the time on the bits that mattered later. That was my feeling about it.
Yeah, I mean overall, it probably sounds like I'm harshing on this game more than I actually really feel about it, but it was more that just once they
point out though, yeah.
Once they established team up battles, it was like and do it again.
This is what I was saying to you though. Yeah, I guess like that's why I'm not sure about how I feel about it because in retrospect I do feel like the end kind of wrapped up real quick. Like you do get this vibe of cut content.
If it had been fight a guy, fight a scary fight the Vulture, then fight the Rhino who's a bit more scary.
Yeah. And
then fight the other 2 teamed up.
Yeah.
That probably to me would have been more impactful because once you get to the
and also it's this point about like so yes they've like managed to cut out time by having you fight these 2 at once and stuff and I actually quite like the pacing of that. If you're even a remote completionist, the amount of padding that's introduced by basically so all those crimes that you spent like that huge long section solving, right? You had like that huge long story section to solve 5 crimes in each area of each type. So 10 crimes in each area. Suddenly they drop that on you in a very short section of the game.
Yeah.
And then also same with they dropped a bunch of other stuff all at once. And I wanted to do that before the story was over, so it felt like a grind at the end there. I have to say. I was just like I just spent an evening swinging around like beating up stuff, which was fine. Like it wasn't like luckily the combat is still enjoyable after a few hours.
I am going to go back to this. When I can, I'm going to go back to this game and 100% platinum trophy it because it just is that much fun.
Yeah.
But in terms of... I
managed to get the platinum trophy, but I also now set my sights on like 100%. Like even though it doesn't give you anything for it, like I want to get all the gadgets because I haven't fully upgraded all the gadgets, and I want to. And then there's also like all the little missiony things to do, like where it's like free run. It's like run for so long. I just want to 100% this game. And apparently they're bringing out New Game Plus as well.
Yeah, well that's the thing. Like once New Game Plus arrives, I think I will. I think I did enjoy the story enough that I will want to go through it all again. Same. And have scratched my itch of all of the side content and just focus on stories.
Yeah.
Story missions. And I think it will be enjoyable to play knowing where everything ends And I think maybe we should get into talking about the more dramatic spoilery moments at the end.
So let's quickly recap where we're at. So as you said, Doc Ock ends up orchestrating the release. You end up fighting through all the bosses. You defeat Martin Lee again, and then you go on to Doc Ock. Now so what happens is that Doc Ock releases the Devil's Breath on there, and the thing is, like, I did quite like how you had so many close calls with the Dragon's Breath, and you finally like contained it, and then he just turns up and he's like, breaks the glass. I'm like, crap. And I have to say, they did drum it up to slightly more than I thought it'd be, like just people dead like instantly.
Yeah,
it did have less of an impact, like, because it felt like it went on for days, because you get the crap beaten out of you the first time you get the warning from Doc Ock and thrown into the river, right? And you have a recovery time in hospital. And there's a nice moment where you save Aunt May, MJ, and Miles from the fire.
Do you save them from the fire?
Or
do they save you?
Then they save you. And I thought it was a really touching moment. I think it's really nice. That's where MJ and Peter like drop this whole like they drop this whole kind of, because they've like been on and off, and they're like, oh, we're partners kind of thing.
I really, really enjoyed that scene. It's just jumped back to my brain when he texts having just arrested Martin Lee. He texts her saying it's over.
Oh my god.
She's like, okay, fine. She's just like she finds him, and I was like, yeah. Man, have I been there.
Well, this is what I really liked about this game, and I feel like as an overall theme, and I think we may have touched on it initially, was what is so good about this game. And we have said this before about like movies and stuff, where it's like you can either have a thing where like loads of explosions are going off and it means nothing, or like the smallest thing happens and it means a lot. And it's all about, because at the end of the day, a story is all about like the people involved and you being emotionally connected to those characters, and understanding why their actions are driven the way they are, and also them being relatable. And what I love about Peter in this game is his situation is so relatable, and it's actually in a slightly different way to what you. So initially he's relatable in like he's an awkward teen growing up in high school, right? But this is like, he's after this now, but he's struggling with his rent, and he's got like, him and MJ have gone through something, they've broken up, and there's that stage of it now. And like you say, there's that text conversation scene, and I just had a big smile on my face the whole way through that, because I was like, he's this superhero who can solve all these problems, and yet he still has problems with like
he can't slide into a DMs.
Yeah. And like, that bit where he says it's over, like he's sharing the news about like the fight with Lee, and he takes
like,
it as
it's over. Interestingly, do you know about the emails that Kevin Feige sent to Sony during the Amazing Spider-Man sort of era?
No.
Well, like,
who's Kevin Feige?
One of the head guys at Marvel.
Oh, okay,
like the head guy.
Right. Okay.
At least in terms of the MCU.
Yeah.
He was actually saying they were asking for feedback and their like Marvel's opinions on the Amazing Spider-Man franchise or whatever.
Yeah.
This was when the Sony leaks happened for that terrible Seth Rogen movie. This came out, and they were saying that the Marvel people, Kevin Feige was saying to Sony that focusing on Peter Parker and his parents being secret agents is a bad move, because it takes away from this idea that Spider-Man could just be anyone,
yeah.
And it takes away from the relatability of the character. It almost makes it seem like the Spider-Man thing was his destiny.
Yes.
And while that's kind of appropriate for more characters like, I don't know, Black Panther or Thor, that have this sort of thing of lineage and heritage to their powers, Spider-Man is supposed to be like, this relatable guy.
He just got caught. He's very clever, but he got caught up in something, and then he's got to take. It's how he deals with that responsibility.
Yeah, like most villains,
that power anyway.
Like most supervillains in comics are just like normal people that have a really shitty bad day, and it breaks them.
Yeah,
and then they can't come back from that. And Spider-Man has a similar thing, but for being a hero.
And he lands the other side of the track, and because of his upbringing,
and he can't. He has to learn like what it is to have power and to be a hero, and to actually like put those things into practice. And I think that this game absolutely nailed that. And once the Devil's Breath,
it's very well put.
Once the Devil's Breath infection kind of comes out, it starts affecting people close to Peter.
Yeah.
And
you just feel like the whole way through this game, like there's like these two parts, and I know it's been said a million times, but like the best parts of the game was absolutely where his worlds clash, and it comes more and more together all the way. And then after this escape happens, you get several key moments where like the whole troop's really together, right? Like you've got May, Miles, MJ, and Spider-Man they're a team. You feel really close to them. You've had the whole game, getting to know and love them. You have that fire moment, and MJ and Peter share a great moment. And then there's this thing that kind of creeps up. Let's just talk about the big thing, right?
Yeah.
So Aunt May gets sick, right? You see, she's trying to like cover it up, but you see like she's
coughing blood.
She's coughing blood, right? And in a weird way, it kind of sneaks up on you. And from my perspective of playing this game, I just did this classic thing of like, when like you're watching a show and a main character's in peril, and it doesn't impact you because
you
you're
just
like,
go there.
They are fine, right? I was just like, they're just throwing this in here to up the stakes, right? So in the same way, the city's on fire. It's not going to be on fire forever. You're going to solve that. I was like, it's like it adds another thing to like the motivate. So he's so Oscorp developed the serum, and you're like, obviously you got to get on it because everyone else still. But I don't really care about them. What I care about is May. Like she's the reason really that we're doing it. Like I know the rest of the city's ill and at stake, but having her ill as well puts something close to you in the stake of what's going on.
Yeah, I began to get suspicious again because the Devil's Breath is released, and you think it's just going to be the end of the world, and really, like the end of the world was more. It felt that way because of the raft and the prisoners on the loose. Like the Devil's Breath, mechanically, at least to the game, doesn't really affect you all that much.
It's a background thing, and I guess you go and help out and people are sick and it's mentioning it.
Yeah.
So it is there, but you're right, like visually and mechanically it's the fact that there's mad gunmen on the street and there's a fascist military force
But then like I do feel like that sort of makes the section with Miles, like where it forces him into more, the city becomes a more dangerous place, and it forces him to then. He has that great scene where he stands up to those criminals.
Oh yeah, and he takes on Peter's advice from earlier,
like how to fight,
how to fight, and the guy runs away. And I like that actually. That going on again is like you really just get the sense for how good a hero Peter is, and I like the fact that Peter's already gone on a journey, but you still get that arc in the game, but not as like Peter going through that. It's him. Miles is going through that arc now. And so that's a great parallel, right?
So I started to get suspicious. When there was a scene in the kitchen with Peter, Aunt May, and Spider-Man, and I was like, they might do it. They might actually do it because again, like the thing you're thinking of is like Aunt May lives, Uncle Ben dies, right? So she's always sort of been considered as safe. She hasn't been killed off in any continuity.
This is what I was saying to you the other day. Let's get it out there. I think if you listen to this, you haven't played it, and you just don't care about spoilers. Aunt May dies, right? Or she's ill on her deathbed, and you've got the serum, right? That's all over. You've just gone through this super emotional, hard-hitting bit with Doc Ock, right? Like Peter is because in the same way you've got like Peter and Miles, like Doc Ock was like this other side to Peter. So, Peter's kind of these two things. He's this strong like hero character, but then as Peter, he's still an intelligent guy. In the same way, you've got kind of Tony Stark and Bruce Banner, right?
Yeah, Tony Stark and Bruce Banner. Yeah. Oh yeah, sorry.
I just mean like they're more than just their superpower. Like they've also got the intelligence side to them. Peter kind of has that same thing.
Sorry, for some reason, what translated in my head was you saying sort of like the Incredible Hulk and Tony Stark.
Oh no!
And I was like, no, I was gonna give you shit.
You just heard Bruce Banner translated it to Hulk instantly. No. What I was getting at though is that.
It's great that in my brain I have a filter for secret identities, and then Iron Man and Tony Stark are one in the same.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Same with Bruce Banner and Hulk.
Yeah.
But and I really like how you've got this like several layers of mentoring going on. I just really liked how real all the relationships felt.
You kind of feel like if Peter wasn't Spider-Man, he'd still be working for Doc Ock because he still had that intelligence.
Absolutely.
And he'd still do the heroic things for Ock that he does.
This is Peter's arc, right? He has this inner hero in him, and he's still expressing it, like not just on the streets. And in fact, I think he sees that almost as bigger than his Spider-Man work. Like in some ways, he's like, this could help a lot more people than I can just fighting crime on streets, right? He's like, this is bigger than Spider-Man, right?
Yeah.
And so you have this super emotional thing with Doc Ock, and you're like ready for the story to wrap up now. Like he's in the raft, like you're like, thank God, like this is over. And then, it's sad. Like she's on but no, you don't worry. You got the doctor working on the serum, and then he's like, and basically it comes down to, it's going to take an hour. So to get this anti-serum out to people to start saving lives, it's going to take an hour.
He said 2 to 3 hours.
2 to 3 hours, and Aunt May basically doesn't have that long. So you could either administer the only serum left, and save May, or you basically have to let May die.
I thought it was very interesting that throughout this whole scene, Spider-Man is still in his costume, and the Doctor is talking to him, and there's no assumption of anonymity. Like, it's very clear that the Doctor knows that that's someone very important to Spider-Man.
Yeah.
But because this guy his life is in debt to Spider-Man, like, it's almost like Pete's not concerned about.
I know. I like it. I really like that whole.
But he also,
that scene.
Once he explains the thing that you just said about there's a choice here, like we can either save someone right now.
He goes, "I'll leave you."
He's like, I'm just gonna step outside and look away, and it's almost like saying to Pete, "Look, if you want to save your aunt,
do this, I'm not going to tell anyone, right?"
But also, like, Spider-Man has saved the city and sacrificed so much that it was like, no one's going to blame you if you don't want your last family member to die.
This what even makes it so much better as well, like, because I really wasn't expecting this. Like, I'd like been quite heartfelt during that Doc Ock scene. My emotions were already running high, but then they hit you with that, and I was not ready for it. I was like, man, like someone's cutting onions in this room. I was sad.
Like, fucking Aunt May got a really like raw end of the deal in this adaptation. Like in the Raimi universe, she just sort of stands around and bakes and makes tea.
Exactly.
In the new ones, she's all like young and attractive. In this one, she was like a kind of blend of the two, but she was the most like altruistic the character had ever been. She worked at Feast. She like improved the community. And then all of that gets kind of taken away from her when Martin Lee sort of sullies that reputation, and then the Martin Lee then engineers her demise by releasing the Devil's Breath. And then she dies.
Yeah, but this is what I really love about this one, because on the surface, it's very comic booky. It's Peter is very light. He doesn't swear. It's like, and it's this thing about actually making something dark or impactful isn't just about it's got a really dark color gradient over the top of it, or saying they're gonna swear in this one, or it's an R rating. This was proper dark. I've seen films that are gritty, quote unquote, but really don't have any of the emotional depth that this had. So this is a kid's thing, but it had all these really dark, tough themes. And like you say, she is a saint through this, and she just keeps getting a raw deal. And actually, I think it's a theme through most of it. I can't remember something where
husband dies, decides that she's gonna fix the community.
Guy who runs it turns out to be half evil, super villain.
And then inadvertently kills her.
Yeah, exactly. And
even her freaking nephew wouldn't save her life.
Yeah,
that selfish bastard.
But I thought it was really touching, and I really like how they. I don't know. I just have a problem with things where either the villain's too 2D, or the hero is too 2D, or not even a good person, and you just expected to like him because they're in a costume. Whereas this, it really just felt I understood everyone's motivations. Even Norman, right? You're he is a dick, but at the same time, let's talk about that twist, which is that.
Hang on. One thing I want to say on Aunt May. Just before.
I have a lot more to say on Aunt May. But okay, let's stick on Aunt May.
Right, so in the Aunt May scene, I mentioned earlier that Peter is still in the Spider-Man costume.
Yeah.
And he's talking to Aunt May right before she dies, and she says,
and he says, "Ma'am, you're going to be okay." He's trying to put on this
yeah, he doesn't want to let her know, but she kind of says, she has something to let him know that she knows, and he says, "You knew?" ? Which he had previously said to Doc Ock 5 minutes ago.
Yes.
And in that scene, Doc Ock was sort of a threat. I know who you are. I've always known, but I was waiting for the opportune moment to threaten you with that.
Yeah.
And with May, it was she knew. It was an inverse of that. She knew, but she didn't want Pete to worry about her worrying, so she allowed him to have that secret.
It's so, and it's another layer to how amazing she was. And then also though that she chose to basically reveal that because she knew what was happening, right? She wasn't it shows that she knew she was dying, and she knew he had to make this choice, and she couldn't die. She knew she was going to die basically, and she couldn't die without letting him know how proud she was of him.
Yeah.
And so she said, she says he said, "Oh, I didn't want you to worry." And she went, "I did worry, but and she just basically then told him how amazing he was for, and how proud she was of him. Oh, it got to me. I was like, that is so sweet. And then the motion capture, like the animation on that scene, like where he's got the serum, and you know what? I wanted him to save her. Like, and to have something that, like, most things I'm just a backseat and I want to watch it. I wanted so badly there to be a quick time event where you could choose, like, and
yeah, I do. I know what you mean.
Press square to jab it onto the syringe, but he's there, and he's so close to putting it on, and like part of me was like, do it, like, and he didn't, and he was the hero that, like, we know he should be, but it's like,
and that's kind of the thing. Like, there is no choice. There is no choice for Spider-Man. He has to be that hero.
If he did that, he couldn't go back out and be Spider-Man and live with that. Like, he, you know.
Like, he stays true to his philosophy and his ideals, even under the worst scrutiny imaginable. And that's what I thought was brilliant about that scene, is that it wasn't necessarily like, there's a lot of Spider-Man media where the people that Peter Parker love are put in jeopardy, and the trope of this is the Raimi films, and every villain kidnaps MJ in every single final scene in the film. And it was almost like you have something here where it's a similar thing, like Spider-Man. Do you choose to save the kids, or do you save MJ?
Yeah.
We are who we choose to be. Now choose, as Green Goblin would say. Like, in this scenario, you have that same idea present, but it isn't like a cackling villain in a suit.
Yes.
It's like a very somber morality like thing.
And that's what I quite liked about it. It's not villain driven, right? Because actually in that scene, so yes, it was triggered by the villain, but his plan was never kill May, right? Like, his plan was like, I'll release this, and this is going to have the effect of ruining Norman's career and image, right? Even into the extent where he's like, you know what, like, afterwards they can cure this. That doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter what happens to the people, right? So there was no, like you say, villain there holding and forcing him to make this choice. This was like, and that almost to me had this like parallel of like, there are some choice in life that you know, it's like neither option is good. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, like either way, this is gonna suck. And like, he did the decision that meant he was going to be able to live with himself, but like, he's just missing a huge part of him now. And like, you know, afterwards it shows you the positive effects that choice had, and you know, and it's a testament to May and him. You know, you saw the, you know, them lining up and curing it. My only thing with this, by the way, is that I was like, so you're telling me they made this anti-serum and they just didn't recall what was in it or have this manufacturing process? I was like, you can't just whip this up again, right? So it's like, so was it implying that, like, I guess it was
got that maybe they got to the anti-serum by happy accident and couldn't replicate it, or if
they did, it was going to take like another day, and in that time
everyone
millions
would
have died, or it has spread beyond control. So I guess it was like
I mean, look, we can talk about convoluted writing surrounding that Osborn lab all day.
Yes.
Like the fact that a spider crawls on MJ's back, and just stays there for like what feels like a year.
Yes.
You know, it travels halfway across the city with her.
But I loved that. I thought it was so funny. Like, because the thing is, part of it is, I was like,
as soon as they showed, they're working on other spiders, I went, okay, well, how is that going to happen?
How's that getting to Miles?
Yeah.
But part of me was like, you know what? Like, we had Spider-Gwen. I was kind of like, I was ready for MJ to get bitten at some point. I was ready to be like, is this how they change the Spider?
They make you think that
they subvert your expectations. They put Miles in the game, who you know Spider-Man, but suddenly, boom, Spidey MJ.
Yeah, I mean, it would be great because it's like Black Spider-Man doesn't matter anymore. Feminist Spider-Man, though.
That's the modern day one.
But yeah, like it felt to me, so there are some points where it's just like it does feel like comic book writing, but as long as the emotion in the scenes is really like prominent, then it doesn't really matter.
Oh, for me, they just got the right things right. That's what I mean. Like, like the heart was there, and like they'd spent enough time on the characters, and you know, and actually that can excuse some silliness. Like, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, also the thing about that Norman Osborn would have a secret lab.
Yes.
That he also had he left clues
in the house,
how you can open the.
Exactly.
Like, when you have I love it when people have passwords that they just can't remember.
But the thing is, though, he is a senior, so it's completely believable that he would have had to write down his passwords.
Yeah, fair enough, right?
Like, I'm not like I don't think that's unbelievable. So I work in IT, and we see that all the time.
Let's talk about the the next part of the curse of Peter Parker and how everyone connected to him is
just doomed to like.
We said in the last show, or you said in the last show, that it's very obvious something is going on with Harry.
Yeah.
And there are references throughout the research stations that Harry's not around, but he's a presence in the game.
Yeah. And so this was the thing. So my thinking was, so I was like, right, how are they getting Green Goblin in? And your hint for Green Goblin does not come until very late game.
Very late.
It's like the last 2 missions basically.
And it's like the proto Goblin stuff.
Yes, yeah. But I love how you look through it, right?
And you see
it's syncing with the hoverboard, right? That's super. So you look through a mask and it reveals a crack in the wall which lets you go, and that's where the lab is.
Yeah.
So you see the Goblin mask and it says a little syncing sign with the hoverboard. So you're like, right, the Green Goblin tech is in the game, and then she finds the grenades later. MJ in the sneak scenes. But yeah, and I was thinking, so initially, before this, I was thinking Harry's away in Europe. I did actually believe he's out of the country. I didn't call that, but I was like, something's going on with it. Like, he's not just out on a trip, right? It's like there's something going on with him. But I liked where they went with it.
When you got into that lab, did you...
Oh, I saw... So, yes, so the container. So when I was exploring the lab, I looked at the screen and I saw there was a heart. And I was like, okay, what is in there? So I had 2 things in mind. I was like, it could be something related to Harry, or part of me did think symbiote. I was also like, so part of my mind was like, is this...
Well, it turned out to be both. I mean, yeah. I was wholly on the side of it being Harry Osborn,
yeah,
and that's just where he was keeping him until he could figure it out.
Oh, because at this point you know that he's ill and research, yes, so
because it's in Norman's house,
yes, it's
in
Norman's house.
They do make a... I mean, that's when you start getting into like why Norman Osborn was inadvertently like doing all of this crazy science
this
stuff.
This is what I mean by it's like I enjoy this level of complexity where you can sympathise weirdly in this twisted way, because this is what happens in the real world as well. No one really does stuff like, unless they're mentally ill. No one really, like, everyone who does even bad things believes they're in the right. And
totally.
This is the thing that like a reason why a lot of movies and stuff get villains wrong is because they don't put like they're just being evil because they're just evil people, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's just the worst. Just because they want total control, it's just a terrible. I cannot empathize with that man. Like that, he's mental, right? Yes, beat him up and do it. But when you got people like Thanos, right? He's a sociopath, but he is still grounded in a lot of ways. He's got real relationships. He acts like a real human.
He thinks that he thinks that what he is doing is going to be best for everyone.
Yes.
And he also believes that everyone else thinks that as well.
Exactly.
They just don't have the will to act on it.
To do it. And then you get into this game and you've got like everyone. They made sure everyone had this mode. And yes, you got these like even like the to the super villains like Electro, and like Electro is probably like one of the weakest ones, but you still understand.
I have serious problems about them having Shocker and Electro in the same game. It's just like I get it that there are a lot of redundant Spider-Man villains.
They're very different. One has like just powerful shockwave gloves. One is electric.
It's still, but
one's tech and one is a superpower.
I think you'll find that the reptile is actually a lizard and the scorpion is a small mammal. So those 2 villains are different.
Mammal.
Those 2 villains are different as well.
Oh, fancy.
One is actually an amphibian.
No, right. Let's face it. Yes, there are closer crossovers than Electro and Shocker are more similar than Vulture and Electro.
It just felt a bit like someone went, okay, like during development, all right, well, we're going to have Electro in the game. Let's start getting work on those electric effects. And someone went, oh, yeah, those are pretty good. We spent quite a lot of time making them, though. Let's throw Shocker in as well.
Shocker doesn't use electric. He's concussive. He's like shockwaves.
It still just felt very much like...
Although they did reuse it, what I did find funny is I did think the exact same thing, but for something different. So they did all the electrical storm stuff. By the way, that's super cool when you're first approaching Electro and you can see in the distance.
Yeah,
there's like the lighting coming up from the Transformers. I know that's great. But there's the suit power you get where like when you're beating up people in the air, you get charged.
The static charge, yeah.
I had that on and I had to turn it off, not because I didn't like the ability, but because it ruins cutscenes. Right? So that fire scene, what will happen? So you beat people up in the air in the game, and then it discharges when you do like a ground attack or like a swing or whatever. but if you don't use it for a while in the game, it will just fade away. If you have that and you enter a cutscene, it stays on through the entire cutscene. So he's like having his heart to heart with MJ, and he's just like sparking. Like, oh, it's like this has ruined my immersion.
Ooh, sparks are flying here.
Yeah, real electricity. These guys. Anyway, what were we saying?
We were talking about Harry Osborn,
but the motivation behind everything. So I was just saying how like even Norman Osborn, who you just outright hate, like, so you know. In Norman's quest to try and cure Harry, he made the Devil's Breath, and he held on to it and kept it so personal to him because he genuinely believed he could turn it from something that was deadly to a cure. And in that process, and there's a theme here, he risked other people's lives, and he ended up motivating Doc Ock, and he ended up creating Mr. Negative, right? So and then you understand Doc Ock's motivate. So like in the same way, it's like, so he believed what he was doing was right, or it was what was most important to him, and it was very believable. And then you also understood why Mr. Lee was the way he was.
To a certain extent. To a certain extent, it did feel a little bit like at first there was a suggestion of mind control or maybe some supernatural force from the mask, and then it was
getting stronger and stronger. Yeah.
And it just sort of then became. No, he's actually evil, and it's harder. It was harder for there to be a sort of.
They did cover that, like, so he initially had this guilt, and he wanted to make them proud, so that's why he did things like Feast. But there was still like an illness side where he found over days and days and days it got stronger and stronger and stronger, and the stronger it got, the harder he found it to. So it did eventually consume him. It wasn't like he was just like he was waiting for his time. So he's gone fully evil now, but he had struggled with it for a long time. And then that's why he decided to do what he did, because like the episodes were getting stronger and stronger.
Yeah, I mean, and there is the stuff. I mean, the stuff is there. Like you can go into his office and read, like his diary entries and stuff.
Yeah, and he's saying like, oh, I keep getting these like night terrors and stuff, and he's like building up to.
Yeah, I guess I was just. I mean, they present like they present him having a sort of. What I'm getting at is that they present him having a sympathetic side because this Mr.
And then it goes away.
Because this Mr. Negative stuff was like done to him, but also no one knew he was Mr. Negative.
Yeah.
So it also suggests that before he enacted his plan, there was a certain degree of control over his power.
Oh, there absolutely is, because there's the point where like it's not like bipolar. That's the weird thing. So it's not like bipolar where like they're separate personalities. Like he is still.
I mean, that's not even bipolar. It's just two different states.
Oh, okay. I thought. Yeah, you're right. Schizophrenic is what I meant. So anyway, it's not like because you see that when like the people get interviewed like by JJ. They say, "Oh, just filled with rage." So it's basically you go into a state where you're the opposite of what you're just like pure. You're the negative side of you. But yeah, so there is a bit where he's running alongside. So he's in normal form, being a normal guy, and he's at Feast, and he starts clocking onto Peter, and he's normal, and he's basically saying, "Get out of my way." So he knows what he's going to do, and he's not trying to stop himself.
Yeah.
But I guess it's like, but that's the complexity of it. It's like, I guess that's him slowly. It's not like when he's not negative, he's all positive. I think that's the point. Is that which is a bit weird.
I just would have liked. Again, it felt like, although there was an impressive.
The change was too dramatic, right?
Although it felt like there was an impressive set piece with the train sequence.
Yeah.
It felt like in terms of there being an emotional impact of his connection to Peter Parker. Admittedly, with Doc Ock's presence as the main villain of the game, that's obviously going to overshadow that. But it felt very much like the Mr. Lee, Mr. Negative stuff. Just kind of got a bit marginalised and sort of wasn't very.
He got 100% marginalised.
It was not as relevant as it should have been.
You're right, yeah. Like, and also it got to the point where, like, when you fight him the second time, I was just like ready to get past this guy. He's not the end.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And but you also know that he's not going to be talked round.
Yeah.
Because you've been through it before.
Been through that,
so you haven't fought Doc Ock yet. Do you know what I mean?
I was just like, let's get to him, please.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, so going back to the Harry Osborn stuff.
Yes.
I thought it was really cool. I wasn't surprised that he was in the test chamber. No. But I did enjoy that whole sequence of being able to go through the the Osborn household, and sort of reading all of this stuff about... You hear stuff about Harry Osborn's mum and like what their family life was like briefly from the Oscorp research stations, but to be able to sort of hear, you know, how progressively worse this illness has got for the family. And
it was just a stroke of genius to have that set piece, wasn't it? Because as I was going through it, I was hooked that whole way. So yeah, it's a bit stealthy, but the stealth was like you did essentially get free. Well, at start you did get free roam of it until Sable turned up, but and also I liked the fact that MJ was, because you do feel like throughout the game that, you know, both MJ and Pete are really close to him, and they really miss him. And I really liked how in this, when you're reading like his notes, his diary entry, and he references you know, please tell MJ and
Pete,
if I die or whatever, that, you know, what happens and stuff. And I really like how MJ reacts to it, and it really makes you feel like you never met him, but like he feels really well characterized just in those little moments.
Yeah, definitely. And like it was a bit bad in Amazing Spider-Man 2, where Harry Osborn just turns up and he goes, "Hey, we've been friends for years," but he hasn't been mentioned the entirety of Amazing Spider-Man 1, and it just very much feels like an afterthought.
Yeah.
And again, like, this is a very similar depiction, because in the Amazing Spider-Man, he turns up in the film.
Yeah.
And in the same scene finds out that he's dying of a terminal illness. So it's like in the span of like 2 minutes, he exists in the universe and is being removed from it.
This was one of my big problems with the Amazing Spider-Man in general. Like when I first watched the first one,
and Peter Parker didn't really care.
No, when I first watched the first one, I just felt like I was going through the motions again. I just was like, yeah, and this is the bit where Uncle Ben dies and turns into the right. No, and yeah. Anyway, so
but then like because of Spider-Man's whole destiny thing and him being linked to thing, he was like, oh, if I have some of Spider-Man's blood, maybe I can cure myself of this all of a sudden terminal illness I've got.
Yeah.
And Spider-Man's like, yeah, I just don't really think I should give you my blood. See ya.
Psych.
And it's like, if you expect why should the audience care if the character doesn't?
Yes.
And to have MJ then break the news to Pete, rooftop rescue, so that scene was awesome. That she escapes the Osborn penthouse by jumping out the window
away from Sable.
It's like, just give me a minute, I'm not quite there.
She was like, you don't have a minute.
Yeah.
And she's already like skydiving.
But you know what it's going to be, like, you know where that scene's going. It's great when it happens, but also then immediately following that, you have the MJ has obviously told Pete, and then he's processing the information that you just discovered through that mission.
Having characters react how humans would. Like, it wasn't just like you find this out and then it just seems like none of the world reacts to that, right? They gave time to the characters to take that in.
But also there's a reason to play as MJ. Again, going back to the thing we said about Miles and the Rhino sequence offering a different perspective. Like, narratively, it doesn't really make sense for Spider-Man to be sneaking through.
No, and also he'd have gone in there and he'd have seen where the lab was and just L1R1 the door off and like not read any of that.
Totally. Like... goes, oh, there's a container over here. Oh, boom.
Yeah. Oh, I've gone through the vent. Like, yeah.
So, for them to have this slow realization of you figuring out this stuff and reading it, like, it did feel like playing as MJ added something to the game.
And also having her as a journalist in this, that was like this investigative force in the world.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I'm not keen on them just turning MJ into Lois Lane.
She is Lois Lane.
But right. it does give her a convenient reason to be involved in the action.
And it is nice to, you know, it's an interactive. So games are an interactive medium, and it's nice having her as a more interactive, engaging role.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll take her being a reporter and just basically being a copy of Lois Lane over her randomly getting abducted by the villains every 5 minutes for no reason at all. Like,
in fact, that barely happened in this game. She really didn't have any damsel in distress moments.
It didn't happen.
No, the closest was the fall. You know.
Yeah.
But then she saved him later. So, you know, psych. But yeah, what were we saying? So Harry. So yeah, let me break this down because I haven't talked to anyone about this. So when end cut scene, Norman goes in basically to have a talk to his. Floating
obelisk.
Yeah, of a son. so it's alluded to in the notes that Harry has like what his mum had as a disease, but my understanding is that so Norman puts his hands up to the glass, and then like the last thing you see is like basically this like goo symbiote.
The symbiote responding.
Right. So let's break this down. Does this mean that the symbiote in this is... So do we think that the thing that Harry was dying from was the symbiote? Or do you think the symbiote was a measure that they tried to use to save him?
It's interesting.
Because, like, symbiote is a space thing. So, space thing. It is a different being from space that comes down and it embodies a host, right? So was that what made him ill? Or did Harry already have the illness before the symbiote? Because it's implied that he had what his mum had. His mum died of it. So that wasn't symbiote related.
But the thing is that the symbiote doesn't kill you.
No.
It doesn't want to kill you. It wants to exist with you, but in a dominant form.
Well, yeah. Well, it's a symbiotic relationship. Hence symbiote, right?
Well, the thing about the other two prime symbiote characters are Carnage and Venom.
Yes.
And both Eddie Brock and Cletus Cassidy experienced like mad separation anxiety. They wanted to be with the symbiote. They thought it was the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah.
So I don't think it necessarily makes sense from the perspective of like the symbiote being kind of the disease.
Yeah.
I think it makes more sense for the symbiote to be something that if they confuse the symbiote to Harry and the symbiote
keep him alive.
The symbiote dies if Harry dies, then they have a reason to fix each other.
This was kind of what I was thinking was like, so I was thinking, yes, have they introduced... So was it the symbiote? I took it that it was, but I was a little... It
wasn't quite long enough.
But my questions were also like, okay, well, if this is the symbiote, this has big implications because it's like, well, I'm guessing that this was one of the measures that they went to try and save Harry.
I think it would be really interesting if... because obviously the Venom character and Carnage to a lesser degree, like the symbiote characters in general just work as like Dark Link versions of Spider-Man.
Yeah. Oh, good, another mega... Yeah, no, sorry.
If you've seen that video where it's like how Marvel movies come up with villains, it's like, he's Doctor Strange, but he has bad Doctor Strange powers.
Yeah.
It's like, he's kind of like Iron Man, but he is a bad Iron Man.
Yeah.
And it goes through all of the films and how they've had, apart from like Thor, which I guess maybe they did that in Ragnarok, they've basically just had evil version of that character. And that's what Venom is to Spider-Man, and Carnage is kind of that for Venom. But I think it would be really interesting to have that rivalry.
Carnage freaks me out, by the way. I'm just saying, Carnage, like, he's scary. Like, he is a properly scary character.
And, like, Eddie Brock was kind of a sympathetic person before the goo got on him. Cletus Cassidy wasn't.
He was a terrible, terrible person.
Awful, like, redneck, serial killer rapist.
Yeah,
like
horrible man. And then he got this thing that, like, empowered him and, like, fed off of that.
Damn. Like, so, but for me, I think it would be interesting if...
a symbiote version of Harry, is that where you're going, right?
If they...
What would that be like?
If they didn't do a Green Goblin, I'm assuming, like, if they didn't do a Green Goblin 2, if instead, like, the thing was that Harry was a dark version of Spider-Man and they had similar powers, like... That could be interesting. Yeah. It could also be corny as hell.
Well, let's see where they're going with it, because like there's a lot. The slate now is because the other scene is obviously Miles reveals to Peter, and there's some awkward pubescent, like he's like, my body's changing, and then Peter's like, oh, this is awkward, and then it turns out he's Spider-Man too.
Did you see that? I saw a really funny meme, because obviously the last shot of the game before it goes to credits, and then the Norman scene is post credits, is Miles jumping up on the ceiling,
and he joins him,
and then Peter Parker does the same thing. There was a meme where it was like Miles jumped up and it says white men can't jump, and this is like
Peter does it as well.
But like that was a really like touching, positive note for the credits to roll in on.
Because also like you've just had like the funeral scene with May, and I really liked that. Yeah, like you've then got this like a New Hope sort of thing. It's like, actually, Peter does have these support. He's back with MJ. That was really nice. Like the I always have moment was so good, and then and then him with Miles. So you've got. And it's going to be really interesting. So like the sequel, you've got two Spider-Men basically, like Spider-Man in training and Peter, like super cool. So you've got Miles is now like this like Peter Parker we know, this like teen, you know, dealing with his own stuff, being Spider-Man, you know, learning, and then you've got Peter. I genuinely, because you had Miles doing that, thought Peter was going to be the one to die. I was like, he's going to die, and you're going to get Miles as the.
It was it was the obvious way to go with the baton passing would happen.
Which subverted my expectations like massively with May dying.
And hey, like maybe that will happen in the next game.
I was thinking that would be like a natural conclusion to that. It's like Peter sack, because I'm like, what else other than it? Basically, you've got MJ and Miles, maybe Harry, like because I guess like you do feel like they've got that connection. And maybe that's, you know, because they know he's like, you know, ill
Sick.
And being treated. So
yeah, they just don't know
like,
where he is.
This must be some sort of line they're going to try and follow. So I'm thinking that you're going to see a symbiote version of Harry and Norman taking up a Green Goblin role. I think we're going to see a Norman Green Goblin. Only because like,
well, he's in a pretty bad place as well. Norman.
He is. Yeah, he is, and he's got you know, he's got a lot against him. And you know, also I think that, you know, and I don't know how it's going to manifest itself, but I think you could see like, you know, he almost maybe feels responsible. He's trying to do damage control with like I think like Harry probably gets out, and if that goes wrong probably. But yeah, you got 2 Spider-Men in the same universe going on. Like that's super crazy. You got Peter without May for like the first time I can think of. So he's going to be dealing with losing May. He's going to be, you know, you got Miles on the scene. Yeah, I think Norman Green Goblin and the symbiote Harry, which I'm really excited about. I want to see how they do it because they've nailed this one.
I really hope that it doesn't end up being like a Last of Us God of War thing where Miles is just your kid's son that you have to walk around.
Yeah, I don't think so. Well, possibly a co-op would be sweet.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think if they have a similar thing where you're playing as multiple people and they have the Miles stuff as almost like a lo-fi Spider-Man thing.
Or like his abilities manifest themselves in a different way and complement him. So like what they could do with this is like, yeah, he's been bitten by a spider. But we don't know, because obviously Oscorp were still researching the spider.
Yeah.
We don't know what strain this spider's at. Like what abilities, like how does he differ? So like if they had complementing abilities, and if during the game you switch, like they might have it where you can play as each character, or like different parts of the story are played as different ones.
GTA 5 thing.
Yeah, like you play a part of the game as them, you go back and like, or you know, like
imagine the GTA character switch.
Yeah.
But just with swinging around the city.
I reckon we're going to see, and this is also the uniqueness of a game, is like it's exciting as a game because. Yeah, and you could absolutely have missions where like you switch to being the other character and you're doing something else to enable, because it was cool being MJ and having Spider-Man in the midst. It was really cool being Miles, and like their abilities complement each other. So I mean, I'm really excited to see what they do with that, because I think it could have a gameplay implication as well as just a story thing.
Yeah, I think I would. This is completely off subject of story related things.
Oh, although could you imagine like if they had like not co-op for this story, but co-op for like you could jump into like the Taskmaster challenges. You could play those as a duo. So there were like Taskmaster challenges for 2 Spider-Men. So you could play that online, and like one plays as Miles and one plays as Peter. And you got like you can do it on like time trial mode or like combo mode. Oh, that'd be so good.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the Taskmaster stuff. I thought it was cool how
I like how he showed up.
But also how like you would do a couple of challenges, just be swinging around the city, and then boom, he gets you. Because there were so many so many Spider-Man classic things where it's just the story starts with Spider-Man swinging around, and then all of a sudden he's in a fight with someone, and it was really cool that they almost did a random encounter, Final Fantasy VII style thing in Spider-Man.
And it was cool that like it was cool playing yourself. You played yourself.
I would say that if there was one thing I think they could improve on, it's not story related, but so I loved all of the references to the other New York based superheroes. I love that you could go to Alias Investigation, the Rand Corporation building, Roxxon, all of these cool things, and especially like the New York based Defenders TV universe. There were a lot of nods to that. The Spider-Man imposter mission.
Yeah.
He says that he trains at the Chikara Dojo, which is a massive thing in Iron Fist.
Yeah.
And I would like it if those characters were more than just referenced. If they could play a part in the storyline, or
you could easily have absolutely. So I feel like the big hitters, because he's still like he's very much the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He's still like he's not like he'd be a good member in the Avengers, but like he's still dedicated to New York, and he's like on the streets fighting regular crime, which I don't think Iron Man's going around doing in this universe. But like the Defenders, you're right, absolutely exist on the same level as Spider-Man. Like Spider-Man's above them, but like they definitely could play a role in it.
Like why not have a mission where you go and team up with Jessica Jones or Luke Cage or Danny Rand for
we don't know what the other two did. So you got the Black Cat one. You don't know what the next two DLCs could be.
Possible.
You can see it as a DLC.
Interestingly, you can go to like Murdoch and Nelson and Murdoch, and all of the places that where the New York superheroes live, and they all have like red, like evicted stickers on their front doors and stuff, which I guess is just supposed to be like a little wink.
A little hey,
they're not here right now. Here at the moment. But it also does beg the question. Like when I was going to each of them one at a time and seeing like the same thing, I was like, oh, maybe there's a story of like something going on here.
Yeah.
Maybe a Civil War-esque. Let's round up the lesser superheroes that we can grab.
Yeah.
That would be kind of cool. And this is just a completely other irrelevant point about how great the writing is in this game. I like that J. Jonah Jameson is like he has more integrity and credibility than like 90% of the press in the real world.
Yes.
Because he openly talks about like the fact that he likes Norman Osborn, has Norman Osborn on his show, and then when things go bad, he still trashes Norman Osborn.
Yeah.
And like he's still fair on Spider-Man, but he just genuinely believes him to be more of a problem than a positive for the city.
He's also a complete nut job, though. But you know,
undoubtedly, but
who in the media is not.
But people can be nut jobs and also be well-rounded nut jobs.
Yeah.
And he does say that all of this stuff doesn't look good for Osborn, rather than just saying, oh, this isn't Osborn's fault, this is all Spider-Man's fault. Like I was expecting that to be the way it goes.
Yeah, he definitely. I mean, although yes, you pick those moments, but there are definitely moments where he doesn't have integrity. Like he will. Like yes, like there were moments that he showed like a change of heart, and like he did like, but he definitely is not some like reflection of truth. Like there are moments where he literally will just turn like even when you have the cop that is on his side, then you help him out, and then he turns and he rings in to the station and goes, oh, like I used to think like you, I spent some time with him and now I think differently. He would just find a way to then take it back to like Spider-Man being wrong.
There is a scene in but I think it's important for them to get that other side of the character, because like there's a scene
it'd be rubbish if he was just
there's a scene in the Raimi films where Green Goblin flies into his office and is like, tell me where Spider-Man is, and he doesn't tell him, and he could have been killed.
No, he says, tell me where the photographer is, and he protects Peter.
Sorry, yeah, that's it. He protects Peter Parker.
Yes, he has integrity. He protects Peter Parker. Yes, he's not completely. A lot of ways he acts feels like he'd throw anyone under the bus, but when it really matters, he doesn't.
Yeah, and I think, important. And I again like talking about the idea of like a 2D villain, not a villain having depth and having a sympathetic side. Like J. Jonah Jameson says and believes a lot of messed up stuff, but you don't really get the impression that he is acting like just straight out of malice.
He really believes
what he's saying. Yeah,
and actually, though, speaking of integrity, when you do save the day, there is a couple of I love. So immediately after you finish the story, he admits that you did well, and then the next podcast he's like, but there was this wrong, and then by like the third one he's like, Spider-Man's a menace, like, and I loved how like quickly it took him to like turn back to his old ways. But
that's like kind of the thing I've always enjoyed about the character. Is almost just sort of like the natural dynamic is for him to be at odds with Spider-Man, and anytime he starts praising Spider-Man, it feels good, but he has to slip back to the trashing.
Yeah, otherwise, probably the same with Norman Osborn, right? He'll be straight back to supporting him now. Yeah.
Otherwise, it has nowhere to go. Yeah. In terms of story, but you know,
I think that was a good summary.
I think overall this game is really good.
Yeah.
The story is really good, and I like that it went places. And that guy who wrote that article saying, "Oh, you know, Spider-Man supports fascism," what a bad horse.
We discussed this last time. like
a bad horse to like
bet on. Like yeah, because the game even because we then said, oh, you even got Saber that shows up being fascist. Like they go all the way fascist, and like it's literally the police and then fascist forces. Like for God's sake, and Spider-Man actively attacks Sable,
going in on things saying like Spider-Man doesn't agree with like peaceful protests being turned violent, and you can't arrest people up for criticizing authority. What a fucking idiot that guy proved to be.
Yeah,
I knew he was wrong when I read that article. I just hadn't played the game enough.
You just hadn't realised how wrong he was.
So when all of that stuff was happening, I was just laughing at that guy.
It's absolutely incredible. Yeah, because they actively become the villains in the game, and they're doing all terrible things. And Spider-Man, like they're being like locked up for literally protesting, and Spider-Man frees them.
Yeah, and Spider-Man is like presented as the most moral character ever.
Yeah. There's no faults in that. Yeah,
but also it felt like,
but it got clicks, didn't it? So,
but it also felt like that thing of like Insomniac politically being on that guy's side, and he still just trashes them anyway.
Yeah,
you know.
Well, and they basically chosen and the police in this game represent the best the best the police could be, and then Sable represented the fascist arms of the government, like the over militarized arms of.
Well, they weren't even. Like government that
no.
was the problem.
No, but as in like they represented, the idea is when fascism showed itself in whatever form it was, Spider-Man was against it. That's the point.
And yes, Spider-Man saying, "Yeah, I don't care who you are. If you're locking up innocent people in my city, then you're a criminal.
Then you're my enemy." Yeah.
Oh, what a dirty fascist that Spider-Man is. So I think it's funny that in real life the press lie about Spider-Man. And say that he's a menace when he isn't.
Yeah. Having said that, these people, like half of me, just like, I think they probably do genuinely believe that he probably believes he'll probably defend that article, still, but I also do feel like there's a slight knowledge that it will get clicks.
Yeah, I mean totally, but again that goes back to the.
It's also Kotaku, right? Wasn't it? Was it Kotaku?
I don't. That did what. That article? No, it was not this time.
Because I was going to say Kotaku. I wouldn't be surprised if it was.
No.
But anyway, we are definitely at the mark now. But also, I don't really have much more to say.
No,
I feel like we've had a good old chat about it. I've also because we've been waiting to talk about, and I have not talked about the ending with anyone, so it's good to like get all that off my chest.
I think in the last podcast I spoke a lot about what I consider like the quintessential essence of a Spider-Man story to be. Quintessential essence of a Spider-Man story.
Yeah.
Say that 3 times. I think.
Who appears?
I think a lot of.
I don't know who it would be. I was trying to think of some pun.
The Quandy Man?
Quincy Jones. Who's Quincy Jones?
Michael Jackson's producer.
Say quintessential essence.
He was
Quincy Jones appears.
Quincy Jones was amazing because he mixed out all of the like screams of children.
Oh my god!
I feel like this Spider-Man game taps into the thing I defined in the last podcast, and I feel like the more the game went on, the more that structure was being adhered to, and it just felt like a product being made by people who have a lot of respect for the brand. A lot of respect for the character and then the legacy.
And I think tying it back to what we've spoken to before about why Marvel works so well is that I think even though it's so some things need a lot of money behind it, right? I think it's generally viewed that like you get big productions and they play it too safe because they want to make money and it's all about like what do the numbers say, and then actually like it's like indie developments that yes they're not like visually impressive but they have the heart. Well, what I think we've seen is like actually nurturing and culturing a fan base and actually putting money into it and giving it time and letting the right people work on it pays off in a bigger way. Like, and that's what creates franchises. And I feel like they're finally getting that. So like Disney with Marvel, yes, they've had some missteps. Like obviously James Gunn, like that was Disney stepping in and kind of ruining it, etc. But like as a whole, the thing that's made Marvel so like. You can't have that without that money, and the fact they put that money and yet given it to people who are passionate and care about it is so important. And same with the Spider-Man game, where Sony and Marvel have trusted a good developer. They haven't just gone and found the cheapest developer they can and stuck a label on it to sell it through name alone. They found a developer who is a good games developer, who was clearly full of people who and who that team found the people who cared about Spider-Man, and they knew what they wanted to make with the game. And Sony, like Insomniac, have come out and they said, if it wasn't for Sony, this game wouldn't exist. Like, they gave us the time and the money. More importantly, the time. When we said we need more time on this game, Sony gave it to them, like, unconditionally, and they didn't get involved creatively at all.
Well, that's the thing. Like, Sony, the way, I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of it, but the way I assume it is that, like, Sony, you know, they're the other rights holders of Spider-Man. Yeah. So if Marvel and Spider-Man are gonna, you know, Marvel and Sony, sorry, are gonna collaborate on new IPs, and if Marvel are gonna make a bunch of money off of Spider-Man movies, and Sony can't really produce a competent Spider-Man film, I think that's been established now.
Definitely.
I mean, we'll see what Venom's like. I'm sure that's going to be a laugh riot. But,
I don't care at all.
But, it's good that, well, what can Sony make that's good? Games.
Yeah. And they didn't even make it, did they? They just chucked their money at it. But yeah, no, I think...
But that's part of it, though, is that you couldn't have a game...
This game couldn't exist
without that money.
Yeah, and that's what it makes me so happy when... Because as much as, like, I think there's some purists out there who are like, simple gameplay mechanics and a simple story is like a key to a good game, right?
Great.
And that all this like shininess is like, but I'm like, no, dude, it's so fun. Like the animations, the voice acting, the fact you got this like well written story, like it's so amazing. And you know, it's the product of a lot of money. That is a big budget game that had like 2.5 years spent on it. Like, it's incredible.
Yeah, and I mean, like...
And they paid for a lot of talented people. Like,
and to me, like, that's why, like, Metal Gear is such a popular franchise for people, because it's amazing that something with... On every iteration of the series, that something that expensive and that polished has that level of absurdness in it.
Yeah.
Because it would have been focus grouped the hell out of it. And,
exactly.
And to me, like, the Marvel products that are good...
Yeah.
They are ones that they're able to... Like, Spider-Man Homecoming could have been an indie film.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, in Guardians of the Galaxy, they took a risk with the director and, like, the cast, and even when they were looking at what do we have the rights to, they went, Guardians of the Galaxy would not have been top of that pile. Like,
should we do the wrong one with the talking raccoon and the living tree?
The living tree, yeah. They're like, yeah, we will, and we'll give it to this, like, we won't give it to, like, a mate. And this is the thing, and this is why I think Venom will fail, is because I think the Marvel Cinematic Universe has known what to include and what to drop. So, like, you obviously have to cut things and change things, A, just so that you're not telling the same story again, but B, so that it works on the screen. But I feel like a thing like Venom, what that will suffer from is it cuts all the wrong bits and it keeps in the wrong bits, and it's just done to such a formula, and without actually, you know, the people making decisions are more interested in like what it, like, for example, I'm sure like it's PG-13, for example.
Yeah, like it's that level of...
It's like, well, we need to get it in front of as many eyes as possible.
And that's the thing about The Amazing Spider-Man, is that everything was just a Sony product, and all of the music that was featured in the film was from Sony recording artists and stuff. And it felt very much like them saying, well, if we put this in a Spider-Man film, it will be great just as a result of it, rather than the film being great first.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It should have a trickle-down effect of people go, you know what, I saw that in that great movie, and and that product must be great because it's associated with...
That film made me throw out my Sony phone. No, it didn't. I was trying to think of what their phones were made, and he said Walkman. But no, I agree, and it's nice to actually see. It's actually nice to see them realise that it can be a money-making strategy to actually keep their focus groups out of it and provide money to artists. That's always been the problem, is that money, like, creative people don't tend to get the... So creative people don't make a lot of money because they're a bit too busy being creative, and like they're too judgmental, and they elongate projects and stuff, and they're not business savvy, and they don't make business sensible decisions. And then people who are good at money aren't very good at creative decisions. That's and you almost need not to be to make money. So the film industry and the games industry, that's where that collides, and so it's like it generally doesn't work. It's like the more money you have involved, the less creatively, you know, interesting it is. And finally, I feel like the business side has realised that enabling the creative people to do what they do best is a good way to make money.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's the difference between Metal Gear Solid 5 and Metal Gear Solid Survive.
Oh my god, that's like, I actually don't think you could ever have a better, because it's the same engine, right? Like, it came out like so soon afterwards. Like, you had this hugely successful game. Like, if they had done the right thing, people would have absolutely bought it.
I mean, I would have bought it reluctantly.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It was only that I downloaded and played the beta, and I was like, this fucking sucks.
Yeah.
I still watched all the cutscenes on YouTube. Like, that's how much of a guaranteed success that would have been.
Yeah.
That's how powerful franchises are.
I actually remember defending that, because I was like, this could be cool. Like, I was like, I don't really have a problem with like people taking an engine and like making a quick adaptation, because I thought like Undead Nightmares, for example, with Red Dead Redemption was really good, and that you could almost make a comparison with. But then you look at the gameplay, it's like, this is broken. It is heartless. It is like, has terrible gameplay decisions. There is no like creative heart behind this. It is purely designed as a cash grab.
Yeah, and
no, we're terrible at wrapping up.
That's true, and we should get better at that, because it's starting to get cold outside.
Wrapping up, and now the winter podcast that we just like go on about for 2 hours.
Yeah, I mean, we have other podcasts recorded. So, if we don't record another one soon, there's still stuff we can post. I'm never going to post that DSP episode.
DSPS?
The DSP episode. The Dark Side Phil one that we recorded.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I might. Okay, here's the thing, is that, like, I talked about how great and funny I thought the Sons of Kojima were in that podcast.
Yeah.
And then, like, a week after we recorded it, a bunch of stuff came out about them and all of this scummy stuff they were doing. And it just felt like, for me to release a podcast talking about how funny all of their trolling was, just wasn't, like, appropriate.
You know what? I'm happy. I think it's edgy to have some, like, lost archive footage. So I feel like that's, you know, I think it adds to our integrity.
Well, we'll see. If the time between us recording again gets too barren, then maybe I'll post it.
Nah, we'll just definitely keep up with it. That'll be fine.
Awesome.
Anyway, it's been a fun chat, and I hope. Well, if you're listening to this bit, congratulations, and we'll see you next time.
Please like and subscribe to the channel.